Good morning and welcome to the public celebration of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday here in the Jansen Hall. Thanks for braving the weather, coming in person. And thanks to those who have already joined us on Zoom. Program this morning, as you can see there, we'll start with the Vedic chanting by the Sridharaprana Nuns. Larry Ripper will be giving the first talk, joining us via Zoom. On the poetic topic of the Perennial Garden of Knowledge. And then Sridharaprana will be giving her talk on the lessons we can draw from Sri Ramakrishna's life. In between, we'll have a devotional song in between the two talks, and then there'll be distribution of lunch packets. So welcome, and we'll proceed now with the function.
We'll be chanting the Purusha Suktam from the Rig Veda. Om Tacham Yoravrini Mahe Gatum Yajnaya Gatum Yajnapataye Daivi Swastirastunaha Swastir Manushebhyaha Urdham Jigatu Bheshajam Sham no astu dvipade, sham chatushpade, om shanti shanti shanti. We pray and worship the Supreme for the welfare of all. May all miseries and shortcomings leave us forever, so that we may always sing the sacrifices and for the Lord of sacrifices, that is Vishnu. May the medicinal herbs grow in potency so that diseases may be cured effectively. May the gods rain peace on us. May the human beings be happy. May all other beings also be happy. May peace, physical, mental, and spiritual be on us forever. Om Sahasra Shirsha Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat Sabhumim Vishwato Vritva Atyatishthad Dashangulam. The Supreme Person exists, enveloping the whole manifest universe, cognizing through every mind, seeing through every eye, and working through every limb. Nay, he exists, transcending the universe. Purusha evedagum sarvam yadbhutam yaccha bhavyam utamritatvaseshanaha yadannenatirohati. Essentially, the whole universe is he himself. Whatever was, whatever is, and whatever will be, all are his manifestation. It is he who confers on all immortality, by which alone they live. Etavanasya mahima ato jayagumscha purushaha padosya vishwa bhutani tripadasya divi. The whole manifest universe is his splendor. He, the Supreme Person, transcends it very much. By a part, literally 1/4, of his splendor, he supports the universe eternally during past, present, and future, whereas the major part of his splendor, embodying immortality, is beyond the range of the manifest universe. Tripadurdha udait purushaha padosyeha bhavat punaha tato vishvam vyakramata sashananashane abhi. This Supreme Person is outside the range of samsara, of birth and death. Only a part of his, that is 1/4, has become the whole universe. From this manifest part, the sentient kingdom has sprung, consisting of both the living and the non-living beings. Tasmad virada jayata virajo adhipurushaha sajato atyarichyata paschad bhumi madho puraha. From him has emerged the cosmos, and out of this cosmos, which is technically called Virat, all-pervading, making it the basis as it were, the cosmic person, the first creator, came into being. The first-born being gradually grew. He created first this earth and then the various bodies, both divine and demoniac. Yat purushena havisha deva yajnamatanvata vasanto asya sidajyam grishma idma sharadhavihi. Then the devas performed a sacrifice. Since there existed nothing save that person, he himself was the sacrificial offering. The spring season became the ghee, the summer became the faggots, and the autumn became the rice offering. Saptasyasan paridhayaha trisaptas samidhat kritaha devaya yajnam tanvanaha abadhan purusham pashum. In this sacrifice, the 7 Vedic meters represented the 7 boundaries, the 21 ingredients, 12 months, 5 seasons, 3 worlds, and the sun form the sacrificial faggots, and the sacrificers consider the Supreme Person as the animal to be tied to the post. Tam yajnam barhishi praukshan purusham jatamagratah tena deva ayajanta sadhyarishayasyaye. This Supreme Person, the firstborn being, who became the sacrificial offering, was purified by the sprinkling of water and the uttering of mantras. Thus was performed the first sacrifice by the Devas and the Rishis. Tasmad yajnat sarvahutaha samvritam vrishadajyam Vashugum stagum stakre vayavyan aranyan gramyanschaye. For this sacrifice, in which was invoked the all-inclusive Supreme Person, ghee mixed with curds was procured, as also many animals, both wild and domestic, having the wind god as the presiding deity. Tasmad yajnat sarvahutaha richasamani jagnire chandagumsi jagnire tasmat yajustasmadajayata. And as an offshoot of this sacrifice, in which was invoked the all-inclusive Supreme Person, came out the Rik mantras, the Yajur mantras, the Sama mantras, and the various Vedic meters like the Gayatri. Tasmadashva ajayanda yekecho bhayadataha gavo hajagnire tasmat jata ajavayaha. From this sacrifice again have sprung the horse, having 1 row of teeth, and other animals having 2 rows of teeth, different varieties of cows, goats, and ewes. Yat purusham vyadaduhu kathida vyakalpayan mukham kimasya kaubahu kavuru pada uchete. And one cannot imagine how much thought went before the projection of human beings. Which of the limbs of the Supreme Person could represent which section of man? What would be his head, the 2 hands, the 2 thighs, and the 2 feet? Brahmanosya mukhamasit bahurajanya kritaha
Uru tadasya yadvaishyah adbhyagum shudro ajayata.
At last, after long meditation, it was concluded that the Brahmana would represent the head or the power of thought and discrimination or the Supreme Person. The Kshatriya would represent the arms or the power of protection and preservation or the Supreme Person. The Vaishya would represent the thighs or the power of acquisition and distribution or the Supreme Person. And the Shudra would represent the feet or the power of support and movement or the Supreme Person.
Chandrama manaso jatah chakshu suryo ajayata mukhadindraschagnischa pranadvayurajayata.
Then from the Supreme Person was born the various luminous beings and bodies in the different worlds. The moon from his mind, the sun from his eye, the fire and Indra from his mouth, and the wind god from his breath.
Nabhyamasīdantarikṣam Shishnaudhyau samavartata Padbhyam bhumirdishashrotrāt Tatha lokāgum akalpayan.
The space emerged from his navel, the worlds of gods or heaven from his head, the earth from his feet, and the different quarters from his ears. This was the way in which world projection was effected.
Vedahametam purusham mahantam Adityavarnam tamasastu pare Sarvani rupani vichitya dhiraha Namani krutva bhivadanyadaste.
I have known the supreme and magnanimous person who sacrificed himself for the welfare of this universe, of the sun's hue and beyond all ignorance. He, the wise one, molded out of himself by his Maya the various forms and called them by different names.
Thata purastadyamuda jahara Shakra pravidvan pratishashchatasraha Tamevam vidvan amrita iha bhavati Nanya pantha ayanaya vidyate.
The first creator, Brahma, knew the Supreme Person. He, in turn, made him known to Shakra, that is Indra, the king of gods, for the benefit of all beings. Hence, even today, he who knows him and the creation thus, as presented above, as pervaded and permeated and possessed by the Supreme Person, verily attains immortality. There is no other way for spiritual perfection.
Yajnena yajnamayajanta devaha Tani dharmani pradhamanyāsan Tehanakam mahimāna sachante Yatra purve sadhya santi devaha.
The Devas mentally perform the first sacrifice by consecrating the cosmic body of God itself. This sacrifice, or renunciation of selfishness and all one's possessions, has become the basis of all religions. He who bases his life on sacrifice or renunciation verily reaches the highest abode of God, where all the perfected aspirants repair. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sad. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Om. Peace, peace, peace.
we're now going to invite Larry Whipper to give his talk. Larry's an old-time devotee, going way back to the 1970s when he heard Swami Ranganathananda's talks in Sydney, and subsequently joined our society. He's had a distinguished life. He was a councillor on Wingecarriga Shire Council, subsequently becoming mayor for some years. So he's provided a lot of good service to the community, inspired by Vedanta. So now I'll invite Larry to give his talk. I'm just going to flick it to full screen for you, Larry.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay. Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you. Well, I'd just like to welcome everybody here this morning. And before I do start, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm meeting on the land of the Gundungurra people here in the Southern Highlands this morning, and just to pay respects to elders past, present and future in relation to the land that we're all meeting on today, although that be at different custodial lands, just to make that acknowledgement. I'd like to also offer my pranams to Gayatri, Pranaji and to the sisters as well, and wish you all a good day. It's quite wet here in the Southern Highlands, and but we're here together, and we're celebrating the birth of Sri Ramakrishna. And my talk this morning is, I've named it Sri Ramakrishna, the Perennial Garden of Knowledge. So people talk of God realization, but mere talk is of little value. If they are really earnest for God realization, then they will have to pray with all sincerity. Saying this, he started rolling on the ground, crying to the Divine Mother in such a way that people were awestruck. So this is Ramakrishna, this is our master. And how do we, limited by form and personality, measure the depth, the width, the breadth of such an enormous personality? How do we, in our humble efforts, constrained by our ignorance, even begin to believe for a moment that we really understand the infinite Sat Chidananda that manifested itself in the form of Sri Ramakrishna? Even if it were possible to know him as he is, and not how we think he is, could we truly continue to live our lives as we do, as separate entities in the sense of I and me and mine? How is it possible to know the infinite without a complete transformation? And how is it possible to describe the indescribable? If we truly experience him as the infinite, can we still be confined to this little I that we have known ourselves to be and be bound by words? Can we, as Sri Ramakrishna has suggested, enter the ocean of consciousness like the salt doll? And in truth, are we ready to do so? This image and the concept speaks volumes. The suggestion itself contains the solution, but how many of us can really, and with full sincerity, lose our ego identity and give up all of this so we can become qualified to speak with true knowledge and authority? Talk as we may, at best, we can only imagine the infinite Atman and paint abstract images of our understanding. When we try to describe the Almighty through our imagination, we often get lost in the endless and mindless chatter of the mind. The truth is there. We've been told that by Sri Ramakrishna and other avatars and holy people. But what is it? Swami Vivekananda once said, trying to describe God is like attempting to put an elephant in a bird cage. So surely too much talk can not only confuse us, but also delude us. George Harrison, who we know as an ex-Beatle, was also a sincere devotee of Sri Krishna, and he rightly observed that silence often says much more than trying to say what's been said before. There is a wisdom in silence, and we hear stories of our great souls, such as Shankaracharya, taught in silence. These stories tell us of how sages, saints, and learned people would approach Shankaracharya, even when he was a child, and sit at his feet. and how he would answer their questions and doubts, not by way of words, but in silence. How can we believe this, bound by our limited ego and skepticism? Unless we have faith or experience, how can we reconcile any of this? We may have some small insight or experience that we can call upon to at least open the possibility that there is a power beyond our thoughts, and that it is indeed conceivable that ultimate knowledge is accessible through silence. I still remember our retreats in Ganesha Ashram in the Blue Mountains with Swami Ranganathanandaji all those years ago. And anyone else who was fortunate enough to attend one of these would know how amazing they really were. Swami would provide time during the day for devotees to meet with him one-on-one. And before meeting with Swami, I'd often have a question in my mind. I'd prepared it and was determined to get an answer. Of course, when I went into Swami's room, we spoke of many things, but not the question that I had wanted answered. On leaving the room, I remembered suddenly and consistently how I'd forgotten to ask those questions. But watching my thought, I would realize that even without asking, I had the answer. This happened on more than one occasion, and speaking to others, it was not an experience that was unique to myself alone. So how do we explain such a thing? Logic certainly can't provide an answer. Ramana Maharshi, who himself was a teacher of silence and uses words very sparingly, did once say, in spiritual life, we can, like a policeman, spend a great amount of time making endless investigations, but we will never make any arrests. In Swami Buddheshananda's commentary of Sri Ramakrishna and his Gospel in Volume 2, Ramanuja is quoted as saying, the aphorisms are like bright stars, but the clouds of commentary have covered them. That is, that reality can never, ever be established through arguments, as no theory or imagination is irrefutable. Revered Buddheshanandaji goes on to say, therefore, so long as our mind is not pure and its layers of ignorance are not removed, the truth shall not become manifest to us. But how can we speak of truth, of God realization, while being devoid of experience? Shankara has also been quoted as saying, the intrinsic nature of the intellect is to lean toward the ultimate truth, but the intellect through which we try to know the truth is itself not pure. Buddheshanandaji points out that irrespective of this, we may start reasoning with a working hypothesis, and if we are sincere, our intellect will become purer and purer by day by day. If we can let go of the chatter and the self-deception of ego and imagination in our mind, we will ultimately have a better understanding of the reality. And as Buddheshanandaji says, when our intellect is free from all impositions, truth will stand revealed. So until our intellect and understanding of that pure nature, how can we sincerely and in truth talk of knowing God? Swami Vivekananda again says of Ramakrishna, he was contented simply to live that great life and leave it to others to find the explanation. And in speaking about Ramakrishna today and celebrating his birth 186 years ago, we reflect on his life and his teachings. But in all honesty, how can any of us have any true knowledge or understanding of this great soul? How can I or any of us shine any light or increase the intensity of a soul that shines brighter than the sun itself? What authority do I have to speak, grappling for words to offer him when all of the words fall empty at his feet? The best we can do is to go to the garden and gather the fruits that he planted through his manifestation on earth and taste the sweet nectar of the words of those who had been blessed to know him. Until he showers his grace upon us and we have the direct experience, we can do no more or less than that. So let us walk together today in this garden of divine play and touch the Master's feet through some of the words and memories of those who were blessed by his company. Most of us would be familiar with the Gospel and an early meeting of Mahendranath Gupta, M, with Sri Ramakrishna. The conversation is recorded like this. Master, speaking to M, tell me now, What kind of person is your wife? Has she spiritual attributes, or is she under the power of avidya? M, in reply, said, she's all right, but I'm afraid she is ignorant. The master, obviously with displeasure, replied directly to M, and you're a man of knowledge? And so began Sri Ramakrishna's teaching to M. It appeared that M had yet to learn the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. Up to this time, his conception had been one that all knowledge came from books and schools. Later, he gave up this false conception. He was taught that to know God is knowledge, and to not know him is ignorance. This is a point that is reiterated repeatedly by Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, in my opinion, this is the ultimate aspiration of all our sadhanas. This observation made a deep impact on him. His way of thinking was truly challenged, and in time, his whole life was ultimately transformed after keeping the company of Sri Ramakrishna. His sense of pride and ego and his small self was eventually and completely shattered by the master's touch. After Sri Ramakrishna's passing, M would say, I am an insignificant person, but I live by the side of an ocean, and I keep with me a few pitchers of water. When a visitor comes, I entertain him with that. What else can I speak but his words? Such was his sense of surrender and devotion. In the book, Search for Secret India, Paul Brunton speaks of M. He would speak in such a touching manner and so full of affection that it appeared to the visitors that they were listening to these words, sitting close to Thakur himself. A bridge, as if it was built between the spot where he used to sit and talk to Thakur and the spots of Thakur's Leela. Through this, his narratives, these things became real. In later life, as recorded by Dan Gokul Mukherjee in The Face of Silence, which was published in 1926, M said of Sri Ramakrishna, I have written down all that I heard Guru Maharaj Sri Ramakrishna say, but the mouth from which these words dropped like stars from heaven, how can I give you a sense of that? A mouth that was full and was the cavern of immortality. How can we absorb the magnitude of direct experience with one such as Ramakrishna? Just hearing of those who have had the direct darshan of Thakur is itself a blessing for us. But imagine even just for one moment, sitting in his company and feeling his love wash over us. What words could ever describe such an experience? Continuing in his reminiscences of the master, M said, whatever he said came true. His words of prophecy have been fulfilled. No doubt, immortality lurked behind his thoughts. He was not erudite, nor did he speak with any dramatic force. He spoke as the common people speak, simply and directly. Yet his speech was not diseased with perishable qualities. They conveyed to the listeners the sharp tang of the imperishable. Though he is dead, his words keep on fulfilling their promise. During the conversation between M and the author, discussion around fact and legend develops. M asking if the author was in search of Ramakrishna facts or the legends, to which he answered, I seek just enough facts to enable me to gather all the trustworthy legends together. This obviously met with M's approval. This concept of legend is a powerful conduit for connecting with spirit. It has the capacity to take us beyond words and lift us above the constraints that come through the interrogation and interpretation of facts. Surely, such observations like that of Ramanuja about commentary covering the spirit of the aphorisms would support such a hypothesis. Will we ever really be content to experience knowledge by limiting ourselves with a clouded lens of analysis? Sri Ramakrishna himself would often caution his devotees to be aware of the limitations of man. He would say that God is almighty, omnipotent, omniscient, and that it is foolish to estimate or limit his powers from an angular vision of understanding. We know that if we immerse a clay pot in the ocean, we seemingly separate the water in the pot from the ocean itself. But if we break the clay pot, we release the captive water from its apparent bondage so that it again becomes one with the ocean. In the same way, the clay pot of our ego, intellect, inquiry, and inquisition has the potential, I believe, to disconnect us from the ocean of consciousness. Endless analysis and inquiry can certainly become a circle in which we go around and around, drifting further and further from the universality of aspiration and the inspiration that comes from the inherent spirit that is the substance of legend. M continues in the conversation. History and facts are necessary because on and around history will grow legend. As a raw material, there is nothing finer than history. That is why I have written the Ramakrishna Chronicle. But 500 years from now, my work will find its fulfillment when a great poet will use it to create the Ramakrishna legend, as deathless as the master himself. There are two old people in Dakshineswar living yet who saw him just at that time of his first illumination. They say that when he left the Kali temple and passed by them that day, there was such a light on his face that they could not bear to look at him. Whatever I know of the Holy One is committed to writing. It won't disappear tomorrow. But those old folks may die any time. Listen to them and gather the music of their reed flutes while they are yet able to pipe about the Lord. Surely this is akin to the gathering of fruit from the orchard planted by Ramakrishna himself. It is said by some that Ramakrishna's demeanor was the simplest of the simple. He did not incite people to heroic deeds, but his touch revealed God to many. Whenever he spoke of God, a light unknown on earth would come to his face. Then, if he touched anyone with his hand or foot, that person would see the whole world bathed in Ananda bliss for at least 3 or 4 days. How can we even begin to imagine what it was like to be in the company of such a spiritual giant as Sri Ramakrishna? Words, study, hearing, these stories can only whet our appetite. How blessed we really are to live so close to the time that the Master walked this earth. How unique it is to be able to hear and read directly about the first-hand accounts and experiences of those who walked with him and had the good karma to be in his physical orbit. But seriously, how much more so to truly become a star within that universal orbit itself. In the face of silence, the author, Gopal Mukherjee, recounts of M, saying that he was illumined himself by such a touch, and M recounts to us, in those 6 days that I was illumined, life was one. There was no death. Day and night were not marked by any difference. Ananda Rupa, the light of bliss, shone on all hours and all things, and at the heart of all existence sang but one song. Words cannot speak of this, and the mind cannot come near it. I am light. I am the light of silence eternal. I am bliss. I am bliss. His face, then filled with radiance, his eyes were filled with tears that shone like gems. Words and questions were no longer needed. From this meeting, it's obviously clear that M's influence and direct recollection of the Master had a profound effect upon the author, Dan Gopal Mukherjee. This inspired his search for others who had also had a direct experience of the Master. And another of these experiences came about and is recorded toward the end of the book. After meeting an old woman who knew the Master, Mukherjee was urged to make a final pilgrimage to visit Dakshineswar in her company. He was disturbed at that time by the state of the decaying grey walls, gardens that were full of weeds. He thought to himself that none of the glow and the glamour of the old days were there to be seen anywhere. Asking his aged guide to take him into the temple, he was even more disappointed and described the long corridors and majestic ceilings of the shrine as one vast horror. The conversation continued. He began to complain bitterly to his guide. Where has all the joy, Ananda and glory, Jyoti, vanished? Why does this place wear such an expression of loneliness? At that point, her face, described as full of wrinkles, slowly lit up. Between the innumerable lines of her visage ran a great current of expression as clear as crystal. His glory is not of this earth. Nothing can bring this place to life. It died the moment Ramakrishna went. It was his being that made this place. But why? Why did they allow everything, the relics, the simple souvenirs, to die out? That was his question. She laughed. Renunciation is what he lived and preached. How can you make history out of renunciation, she said. Oh, I heard him and saw his face. Sometimes he used to go by our cottage after his meditations in the Panchabhati. Had you seen his face of scorching ecstasy, then you would understand. He renounced even his body. He was free. He felt nothing. He was bound to nothing himself. He even liberated the room where he lived. He did not wish to trap souls or places. He came to free the world. The question arises, if he leaves nothing behind, how are we to know him? She answered, whenever men and women meditate and live selfless lives, there he incarnates. If you wish him to live again, renounce all and seek God. In the book, They Lived with Gods by Swami Chidananda, Hriday remembers. I would notice Uncle taking flowers and bell leaves in his hand and touch them to his own head, chest, in fact, his whole body, including the feet, and then offer them at the feet of Kali. I saw how Uncle's chest and eyes were always red, like those of a drunkard. He'd get up reeling from the worshipper's seat, climb on the altar and caress the Divine Mother, touching her affectionately under the chin. You felt awestruck when you entered the Kali temple in those days, even when the uncle wasn't there, and much, much more so when he was. As long as I was watching him, my heart was full of reverence and devotion. But when I came out of the temple, I began to ask myself, has my uncle gone mad? I think each of us has been faced with this dilemma of faiths, how difficult it is to even begin to understand how these avatars exist in this material world. How can we begin to pretend to understand the infinite with our finite minds? The more we apply the rational mind, the more we doubt and limit the experience. Revered Swami Buddheshanandaji writes, solely through a lack of pure intellect, people fail to recognize an avatar, and being deluded, they disregard him. When the finite being merges with the immutable self, when the difference between seer and seen dissolves, then our judgment becomes free from errors. And only then can we speak in all sincerity of God realization. Until then, let us pray to Sri Ramakrishna to open our inner eye and waken us to the truth. Words based on theory or imagination are nothing compared to the silence that comes from the actions of an enlightened soul. Hriday's mind is again tested at a later time. This time, however, without trying to rationalize or control his thoughts, he, like the salt doll, enters the ocean of consciousness. He remembers seeing a wonderful sight whilst Sri Ramakrishna was walking back from the Panchabhati. Uncle's ordinary human body was transformed, he says, into a luminous form that radiated light in all directions. His shining feet did not touch the earth at all. Hriday rubbed his eyes again and again to make sure it was not an hallucination. He looked around and found that the Ganga, the trees and the cottage were as usual, but he repeatedly saw the master in that luminous form. Hriday then looked down at his own body. He said, I too was shining, full of light, and became aware that this light was no other than the light which formed Sri Ramakrishna. In this talk today, I have no desire for intellectual arguments, nor to compare, to dissect, analyze, hypothesize, scrutinize, or make any commentary on the life of our great master, but merely to walk in the garden of delight and to gather and share some fruits of experience that had grown from the seeds that he had dispersed during his short life on earth, not to count the mangoes, but to eat them. In doing so, I have picked only a few of the very low-lying fruits and now realize the enormity of this task, as the garden is so fertile and bursting with so many direct experiences. I understand how the basket that I have entered the garden with is far too small to harvest the bountiful feast to be found there. One thing, however, that I am more convinced of is the power of silence, a still mind and an open heart. Let us not think, but be. In They Lived with God, Swami Chitananda records the occasion of Sri Ramakrishna's birth centenary in 1936. Garima, who herself was a devotee with direct experience of the Master, gave an address in Bengali, which was broadcast to all India radio. I will conclude today's offering with a few extracts from that broadcast. Whenever I think of Sri Ramakrishna, I picture him in my mind in Samadhi at Dakshinaswar, and I hear his melodious singing, "O Mother, make me mad with thy love. What need have I of knowledge or reason?" On this auspicious occasion, let us give up dry discussion and intellectual reasoning and enkindle within ourselves burning faith and complete surrender to God. Let us put into practice the immortal message of the Master, and let us pay our homage to that great woman, Sri Sarada Devi, who through her austerity and self-sacrifice helped her husband to fulfill his mission. His power is now spreading in all directions. His heart melted for the poor and the afflicted. There is no end to what we can say about the divine life of Sri Ramakrishna. Language and expressions are inadequate to describe his infinite nature. There is no division, aversion, or friction in his ideal. There is only great harmony and unity. Let us remember that great soul, Sri Ramakrishna, whose life was a blend of action, knowledge, and devotion, and thereby purify ourselves. And my prayer today on this occasion of Sri Ramakrishna's 186th birth celebration is that he open our heart and quieten our minds as well, so we may truly know and experience within our own consciousness that God is knowledge and all else is ignorance. Jai Bhagavan, Sri Ramakrishna, Deva Ki Jai, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Beautiful talk. As usual, it's suffused with your poetic nature, which makes it all the more meaningful. And we will now go to the next item in the program. We're going to be singing, or the nuns will lead the singing of a devotional song to Sri Ramakrishna. I will be putting that up on the screen in a moment so you can follow.
Ramakrishna, Jaya Ramakrishna, Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna, Jaya Ramakrishna, Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna. Ananda Rupa Shri Ramakrishna, Ananda Rupa Shri Ramakrishna, Vedanta Vedya Shri Ramakrishna, Vedanta Vedya Shri Ramakrishna, Ananda Rupa Vedanta Vedanta Vidya Papa Vimochaka Ramakrishna Ananda Rupa Vedanta Vidya Papa Vimochaka Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Nityananda Shri Ramakrishna Nityananda Shri Ramakrishna Nirmala Rupa Ramakrishna Nirmala Rupa Ramakrishna Nityananda Nirmala Rupa Nigama Gama Sara Ramakrishna Nityananda Nirmala Rupa Nigama Gama Sara Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Satya Swarupa Ramakrishna Satya Swarupa Ramakrishna Sachidananda Ramakrishna Sachidananda Ramakrishna Satya Swarupa Sachidananda Sakala Avatara Ramakrishna Satya Swarupa Sachidananda Sakala Avatara Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Atma Swarupa Ramakrishna Atma Swarupa Ramakrishna Akhilandeshwara Ramakrishna Akhilandeshwara Ramakrishna Atma Swarupa Akhilandeshwara Adbhuta Charita Ramakrishna Atma Swarupa Akhilandeshwara Adbhuta Charita Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Brahmananda Shri Ramakrishna Brahmananda Shri Ramakrishna Bhavatarini Putra Ramakrishna Bhavatarini Putra Ramakrishna Brahmananda Bhavatarini Putra Bhaktavatsala Ramakrishna Brahmananda Bhavatarini Putra Bhaktavatsala Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Shri Ramakrishna Ramakrishna Jaya Ramakrishna Omkara Rupa Rupa Shri Ramakrishna.
Next item in the program, we'll have having a talk by Pravrajika Sridharaprana.
I left all the screaming. Voice is a bit. Anyway, let's try. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarva dharma swarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Salutations to thee, O Sri Ramakrishna, who came into the world to establish dharma, that's religion, the embodiment of all the dharmas of the world, and the best of the divine incarnations. Just a bit of story, let me start with. This mantra was written by Swamiji. It is Swamiji's, what do you call, tribute to his great master. There was a devotee by name Navgopal Sen. You see, God and his devotees are like sun and the star and the rays. So we cannot see the sun directly. So through the rays, we can capture. So pondering about the devotees, also equally pondering about the master himself. Navgopal Sen brought his young wife to Sri Ramakrishna for the blessings after the marriage. A young girl must be in her teens. Sri Ramakrishna was very happy with her, blessed her. And often she used to come whenever she could. And when she got her first son, she came to him and placed that child on his lap. The master asked, "Are you giving this to me?" He said, "Yes, master, everything is from you. So this belongs to you." Then the master blessed the child and said, "Okay, now you keep it. You are the trustee. It's under your trust I'm keeping. And when time comes, I'll take the child." And so later on, when the boy became big, he came in contact with the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna and he became a monk of the order Swami Ambikananda. So very nice soul, beautiful songs he used to sing. Brahmananda Maharaj was very fond of him. And that lady who could give her firstborn child to Sri Ramakrishna was Nistarini Ghosh, her name was. Then they bought a house and the suburb was called as Ramakrishna Pura. So they were very excited because Guru's name. And the good lady requested Swami Vivekananda, who had returned from America, to come and bless the house and inaugurate the shrine. And Swamiji went there and with beautiful singing and all, the big group went in the country boat from Belur to this Ramakrishnapur. It's near Howrah. And then Swamiji and that they sang on the way. Even now, every Purnima in the January, Maghi Purnima, we say, the celebration takes place. Even now, to this day. And the shrine is there. It's beautiful, you know. I had got once I had the chance of singing. And then Swamiji, after the puja, he just he was sitting in the puja seat and just he recited this. And this is the greatest tribute a disciple can give to his master. See, the best of the incarnation. Avatara Varishta. You might say everybody is an Avatara Varishta. For the Buddha's devotees, Buddha is Avatara Varishta. For the Christ devotees, Christ is Avatara Varishta. But then there is something in it. So let's explore. Then we ourselves will understand why Swamiji says this. Today my topic is the lessons we can draw from Ramakrishna's life. Swamiji in one of his lectures says, the greatest gift of India to the world is light spiritual. This lamp of wisdom was lit by the Vedic sages at the very dawn of civilization and has been steadily kept burning by the numerous saints and sages and avatars. And Sri Ramakrishna is the greatest among this unbroken line of luminous teachers. He was born, as you all know, in Bengal, in India, in a small remote village. In his teens, he came to Calcutta. Until the end of his life, he lived there. He walked through the streets of Calcutta and purified them. Many great savants, and our Sarada, Dakshineshwar, it's there. It's just 10 minutes walk from our ashrama headquarters. And that's the place where Sri Ramakrishna lived for 30 years and did the stupendous sadhana there. So many great savants and thinkers have described Sri Ramakrishna in many ways. Only two of them I'll quote. One, of course, the French writer, the novelist, biographer of Sri Ramakrishna, the Romain Roland, and that's how it pronounces in English, I suppose. He writes about him as splendid symphony of the universal soul. Splendid symphony of the universal soul. And Christopher Escherutz describes him as a phenomenon. As a phenomenon. And a great monk of our Ramakrishna order and an authority on Ramakrishna Vivekananda ideology says that Sri Ramakrishna was not just a past phenomenon, he's a continuing phenomenon. And Sri Ramakrishna, today let's think of what the world has to learn from him, and we as devotees, what are we learning from him? Sri Ramakrishna says, religion is not for empty stomach. So when the basic necessities of life are met, the stresses and strains that are arising from the political turmoil, just imagine, can you think anyone in Ukraine meditating on God? Impossible. These are not the conditions for it. So when all the stresses and strains from political turmoil or economic conditions are considerably reduced, then the human mind, the thinking people, feel an urge for greater fulfillment. I'm saying thinking people, not all people. Religion is for thinking people. Spirituality is for thinking people. The thinking people feel an urge for greater fulfillment, and that becomes the ultimate aim of their life. So they turn to something else, and that is the science of human possibility. That is religion and spirituality. The need of modern man is an incontrovertible assurance of the existence of a transcendental reality and the possibility of realizing it. This Sri Ramakrishna gave through his life. Like the great Vedic sages who declared Vedahametam Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasat Parastat. I have realized the supreme self, effulgent as the sun, beyond all darkness and ignorance. Tameva viditva atimrityameti. By knowing him alone, one attains immortality or transcends ignorance. There's no other way to go beyond suffering. You might say, well, wasn't there any revelation before? Well, of course, there were. Revelations were there in Jerusalem, in Makkah, in Gaya, in Kurukshetra, everywhere. But they were partial. A particular aspect of transcendental reality. What Sri Ramakrishna did was to retrace all his experiences and bring them together into one focus, in his own person, so that people could make a study, a comparative study of him. Let's take the first vision of him. We knew Sri Ramakrishna was utterly sincere, 100%, more than 100%. Thought, mind, deed, everything was one. So when he started worshipping the Divine Mother, he just was thinking, what's all this? Is there any reality behind this? And he started questioning, analyzing, and he worked hard on himself to realize the Divine Mother. Of no way, the lady won't show herself. And finally, we all know one fine day, when it became very unbearable, he tried to put an end to his life. And at that time, he had a revelation. We might think, Mother Kali must have just come into life and blessed him. No, he says the first thing which disappeared was the Mother Kali's image. Mother Kali's image disappeared. The temple, the walls, one by one, everything disappeared in thin air. And he felt as if an ocean of consciousness, wave out of wave, coming and overwhelming him. He struggled, he tried his best to resist. No, he was submerged. Ultimately, he became, in ordinary words of us, unconscious. But he attained super consciousness, where the devotee and the divine all one homogeneous, infinite consciousness. And out of that came the Chit Ghanakar, what we are seeing in the bhajan, Chit Ghanakar, condensation of consciousness, the form of the Divine Mother and the devotee, both are pure consciousness. So this was a sort of Advaitic vision. It was not just Advaitic vision. From the impersonal, personal. You see, Dvaita, personal aspect of God. Advaita, impersonal aspect of God. But Sri Ramakrishna is impersonal, personal. That's the thing. It's not this way, that other way. And from that impersonal, infinite, pure consciousness came the form of the Divine Mother. And that is why in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you remember him arguing with the Master. We should tell the people that they are not worshipping clay, but they are worshipping God in the clay. But the Master said, but why clay? It is the spirit image. M couldn't understand, because without experience, one cannot understand. So this spirit image, this is the basis of his, this is the basis of his spiritual experience. And after this, so many sadhanas, whatever he did, it culminated in this experience. That gave him the proof that all religions are same, equal, and everything will ultimately lead to this experience. This has been beautifully told by Sri Ramakrishna, by Aurobindo Ghosh. Can you put that? So a person, Swamiji said, he is Avatara Varishta. Only a person with extraordinary spiritual prowess can gain all this experience in one life. For one experience, the whole life takes, birth after birth. But whereas in Sri Ramakrishna, with such rapidity, he says, in the life of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, we see a colossal spiritual capacity. First, driving straight into the divine realization, taking as it were the kingdom of heaven by violence, and then seizing upon one yogic method after another and extracting the substance of it with an incredible rapidity, always to return to the heart of the whole matter, the realization and the possession of God by the power of love and by the extension of inborn spirituality into various experiences. Just wonderful quotation of this. And by the spontaneous play of intuitive knowledge. Such an example cannot be generalized. So Swamiji is right in calling him, his guru, Avatara Varishta. This is the uniqueness. Now, what are the principles of harmony of, now we know Sri Ramakrishna represents harmony of religion. He is the Samanvayacharya. So what are the principles of harmony of religion and what are the implications of his practicing different religion? Let's take into account. First, according to Sri Ramakrishna, as many minds, so many paths to the ultimate reality, which means that there cannot be a single religion for all people. In one of our scriptures, I think Mahabharata, there's this saying, Nasa Munihi, Yasya Mata Na Bhinna. He is no Muni who does not differ in his opinion. See, thinking people always differ. You have got different perspectives. So differing mutually is not something wrong. You have a different perspective. I have a different perspective. Thinking minds always differ. Only it's unthinking, dull minds who follow. That's a mob. That is that. But thinking people, they will always differ. And Hinduism always encouraged this. So, nasa munihi yasya mata na bhinna. So, there may be different paths, but the ultimate goal, it might be the same, but the paths are different. And the second thing is, each religion offers a distinct and unique way of experiencing the ultimate reality. This means that differences among the religion are real and have different meaning, a definite meaning in the divine order governing this universe. So these differences have to be made. That's the beauty of life. Variety is the beauty of life. Everything with uniformity. You just go to a city, you can see all like crows, black, white dress. Of course, they are in uniform, please don't mind. But I'm saying, but you go to any other city like in India, it's colorful. So, it's so beautiful. It gives what do you call beauty to the thought. It's so difference is needed. But behind the diversity, one must have the knowledge of unity. This is what is important. And the third principle of harmony of religion of Sri Ramakrishna is spiritual experience must be the basis of true religious understanding, not mere tolerance or social necessity. Another thing is, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Ishwarar iti kortina. Never limit God. God is infinite and he blesses humankind in infinite ways. So one needs to experience God through other paths besides one's own. At least an understanding, intellectual understanding or acceptance. The more one's experience of God, the fuller becomes our spiritual life and greater will be our contribution to the enrichment of the collective life. So, what Sri Ramakrishna implied by his practicing of various religions is, first thing, he has taught us the right approach to other religions. Right approach to other religions. Showing reverence to other religions, other prophets, and even practicing some of them does not mean disowning one's religion. Sri Ramakrishna was very particular, and he used to give the example of a daughter-in-law coming to her new home. So she serves and loves the in-laws, everybody in her husband's house. But she has a special relationship with her husband. She knows that in and through her husband, all these people are related and dear to her. So through one's own religion, we connect ourselves. The Guru Gita says, Madguru Shri Jagadguru, Madatma Sarva Bhutatma. So my teacher, my goddess is the self of all. Myself is the self of all. My teacher is. So this idea comes to them. So, and the second point is he established through his practice of practicing various religions, he established the validity of other religions. Many people may not like this idea, but then a lot of people are benefited by this idea of that Sri Ramakrishna showed the validity of other religions. This is a great contribution to him. And the third is mutual enrichment through individual or group dialogue. This is the implication of Sri Ramakrishna's practicing all the religions. See, this enrichment takes place in two ways. One is when we study the religions of others, we understand the inadequacy of our own religion, what we lack in our own religion. So we learn and adapt those ideas from other religions. And the second enrichment is when we study the other religions, then we understand how wonderful, how life-giving ideas are there in our religion. A thinking person, a wonderful person, has given a beautiful story about this. A certain poor rabbi had a dream where a sage, a Jewish sage, said to go to a bridge under which there are a lot of treasure. So poor man, early in the morning, he ran and was just seeing where is the wealth, treasure. And a soldier was there guarding, and he said, "What's the matter? What are you searching for?" And when told, the soldier felt funny. And so just to tease him, he said, "Oh, I had a stupid dream like you. And I was told that there is a pot full of gold in the kitchen, under the kitchen stove of an old poor rabbi." Huh? My own. So he ran back to his home, dug the stove in the kitchen, and found a pot full of gold. He never knew that he had that, but somebody else told him. So like that, we ourselves won't know what treasure, what life-giving ideas are there in our own religion when somebody else says, or when we hear or read other religions. So this is the advantage of harmony of religion, its implications and principles. Sri Ramakrishna was not only a giver of these ideas for other religion, but Hinduism itself needed his great help. We know how many sects are there in Hinduism and how they fight. Not that they really fight, but through arguments. Never in Hinduism was there a fight with a sword or with a thing, but arguments and all sorts of things goes on, debating and all that. And sometimes they avoid. The Shaivas avoid going to Vishnu's temple, or Vishnu's Vaishnavas avoid going to Shaivas. These things, all the Hinduism, the present Hinduism, which is enjoying the status, it is due to Sri Ramakrishna. He's practiced all the Hinduism, other sects of Hinduism, and he agreed, he approved of all the validity of the religion, Hindu, even the faith itself. And then another important thing is the harmony of the three philosophies. In the intellectual realm, there's a big difference. The Dvaitists will call these Advaitists they are not good. They don't practice any rules and regulations. They are Brashtacharas. They have no rules and regulations in them because they are Advaitists. And the Advaitists will say, "Oh, these Dvaitis, they're ignorant." Even we can remember Totapuri, when he came to Sri Ramakrishna, saw him, he saw a wonderful aspirant for Advaita. And he asked, "Do you want to learn Advaita?" He said, Ramakrishna said, "I don't know, I'll ask my mother." So go and find out from your mother, take the permission from her. He thought he is going to his biological mother. But when he went to the temple inside, Sarada Maharaj says, there was a smile of pity on his face. He said, "Oh, poor man, with all this high qualification, he's still deluded in the duality. Don't worry, with my knowledge of Advaita, he will overcome." So this is the ego the Advaitists have. But Sri Ramakrishna, he accepted all the three systems and he experienced. And this experience made him to declare that these three systems, Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita, Advaita, they are not contradictory, but they are mutually complementary to each other. And he did not accept Advaita as the ultimate. That's the greatest contribution of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna's doctrine of Vijnana is unique. It is, you cannot categorize it either as Advaita or Dvaita. It's something beyond. It is the state of Bhavamukha, which he always was established in, was like standing at the threshold of relative and absolute. You standing at the threshold, you can see outside and inside. So in between non-dual and duality. He was standing in between. This is a unique contribution of Sri Ramakrishna to Hinduism and the world religion. The concept of Vijnani. And it's a very big concept, and it needs a lot of thinking and discussion, which I'm not going to deal with. But he tells it with a beautiful story. He says two friends, a certain friend went to meet her friend, another lady. So the host was very happy to see her. She said, oh, after a long time you have come, please come. And they talked for a long time. And then she said, friend, you have come. Let me go and bring you some refreshments. Saying so, she went. This host was the dealer with silk thread, silk, what do you call, loom. She used to hand looms. So a lot of silk thread, pretty beautiful colors, bunches of silk threads were there. And the guest friend who came, she could not resist the temptation. So she just pinched off a couple of bunches and put it under her arm and held it tight and sat there. And the friend, of course, brought the snacks, and they both enjoyed. And the host immediately could make out a couple of bunches are missing. Now she has to extract it without offending her. So she hit upon a plan. She said, friend, after a long time you have come, and I feel like dancing with you. Come, let's dance. And both of them started dancing. With uplifted arms, the hostess started dancing. But whereas the other lady, with one hand, she's dancing. Come on, why don't you lift both your hands and dance? Because if she lifts, it will fall, bundle. So she did. Anyway, and at last she said, oh, it's okay, dear. Oh, it all depends on how one knows. You know it, I know better way. I can only dance with this. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say, those who say always Advaita, Advaita, they're afraid. They can't mix with the world because they'll get deluded in the Maya. So they retain themselves. They tend to be selfish. You know, there was a beautiful article in Prabhupada Bharata, is Vedanta and escapism? See, in the name of Vedanta, in the name of Advaita, you can become selfish. You can narrow yourself. You can become egoistic. Of course, true Advaitic knowledge will never do that. Those who are given only to the theory and profess themselves to be Advaitists. So this thing happens. So an Advaitist is always afraid. But a Vijnani, he's not afraid. If he closes, he sees the divine. If he opens, he sees the divine. Everyone is divine. So look at the joy of a person. The same thing Swami Vivekananda said to Ingersoll. When Ingersoll told Swamiji, I do not know anything about this. I have this world and I want to extract the best from it. And he gave the example of an orange. Here's an orange. I want to extract the complete juice. Swamiji said, very good. Even I have a fruit. You have an orange, I have a mango. The difference is this. And I also extract and enjoy because I know I am immortal. And I know this whole universe is nothing but the manifestation of God. And I can love everybody as God. Just imagine the joy of loving every human being as God. And you squeeze your orange in this way and get the best out of it. So this is the concept of Vijnana. And this is the basis of the Ramakrishna Math Mission's philanthropic activities. Shiva Jnane Jiva Seva. So this might be for the world. And we as devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, what is he teaching us? Me and you. Let's discuss a bit of it. Hope so. You're not feeling sleepy? Sri Ramakrishna has taught us, we devotees, a very obvious truth. That is, God exists. God exists. God can be realized. And God realization is the aim of life. For this, we need to cultivate an attitude towards God, a name, a form, and dive deep. Even if you're a follower of formless, fine, no problem. Formless aspect of God, okay, that's no, Sri Ramakrishna has no problem at all. But dive deep, go ahead. Doob thou, egye podo, he used to say. Dive deep, go forward. Onward, forward. Charai Vitti. Stagnation in spiritual life is retreating back. So always go ahead, go ahead. This is what Sri Ramakrishna said. He used to sing a beautiful song. Doob, 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 roop sagare amar mon. Oh my mind, dive deep into the God's beauty. Make God the pole star of your life. He has taught us, be always conscious of your divine nature. If not, be aware that you are the child of God. This attitude, he used to say, Mukta Abhiman, the idea that I am pure, I am free, I am the child of God. These ideas you always just keep repeating. You just send the suggestions, especially at night when you are before falling to sleep. Send the suggestions deep into your mind. This will enable us to retain that idea. See, everything we know how uncertain life is. Only certainty is that we are alive and we are able to think of God. That's the only profit. So, he has made our life meaningful. Life has become meaningful for us by showing that life has a great purpose. And this is our best opportunity. We know how people suffer without any purpose or meaning in life, how they go into addiction and all that. So meaning, what is meaning? Meaning is an expression of soul's self-fulfillment. The soul considers only those things meaningful which helps it to attain this fulfillment. And we know this soul in its higher nature is Atman, the part of the Paramatman. And its fulfillment can be only by realizing the Supreme. So this is the thing Sri Ramakrishna has given to us. You are Atman, you are pure, you are the child of God. You are a part of the infinite. Now you realize and be free. How so much of sympathy, he's asking his disciple, oh Niranjan, when are you going to call on God, my boy? The days are going. And he's literally weeping. And Niranjan wonders, my goodness, why is he so much concerned? It's not just for Niranjan, it's for all of us. That cry, the master's tears which came, it's not just for Niranjan, it's for all of us. He's calling us. Don't waste your time. Get on, get on. So this is the big thing we are learning from Sri Ramakrishna. And he encouraged us always to hold on to God, the one hand, and do your work. And then when the work is over, hold on to God with both the hands. And he said, one of his disciples, Hari, later on who became Swami Turiyananda, he would say, Master, when I come to Dakshineshwar, I feel good, nice inspiration, very happy. But once when I go from here, everything is dry. I just can't get that feeling at all. Then the master says, that cannot be, whether you know or not. You are the child of God. His name was Hari. So to me, Harir Das, you are the servant of Hari, whether you know it or not. And he says, existence of certain thing does not depend upon our knowledge, whether we know it or not, it exists. So whether we know it or not, the fact is we are the children of God. This the master is asking us to put nicely into our brain. He wants us to remember this. You are my child. I am behind you. We are your parents. You are our children. This the master wants us to. This is the great benefit we are getting from Sri Ramakrishna. He said, Jiva is Shiva. God enchained is man. Man unchained is God. Pash Baddha Jiv, Pash Mukta Shiv. Man, God enchained is man. Man unchained is God. This is the beautiful equation, definition. And the other thing the master has taught us is divinization of all relationships. We know how he looked upon Holy Mother as the Divine Mother herself. He had such wonderful relationship with his disciples. He looked upon Naren, Rakhal, Hari as Narayana himself. And all those, if few of his close household devotees like Surendra, Kalipada, Girish, before they could come into contact with Sri Ramakrishna, they were Bohemians. So his touch transformed them. And among his devotees, there were actresses, fallen women, who by his grace became his devotees and the redeemed. And we have the wonderful Rasik method, the scavenger Rasik, who used to clean the privy of the temple, coming from the low strata of the society. In those days, these things were very common. And now, nothing. Now is only one thing, money. If you have money, that's enough. Nothing. So at those days, they followed those customs. Anyway, so he was an outcast. And he never had the opportunity of coming closer to Sri Ramakrishna. But he used to see the wonderful grace, the blessings the master was showering on all of them, and he wanted it. So one day, when the master was coming from the garden, from the grove, he went straight. He couldn't control himself. He fell at his feet, and holding on to his both feet, he cried, "Master, what will happen to me?" And his touch made Sri Ramakrishna to go to higher plane. He became absorbed in samadhi. Just imagine how pure the man must have been for the master's mind to go to such a great plane. And he said, after coming from the higher plane, when he came to the normal consciousness, he said, "Rasik, get up. You will achieve everything at the end of your life. Now just do what you're doing." And then from then on, he used to clean the place where the master used to walk. Even when Sri Ramakrishna passed away, he used to sweep and clean the place where the master used to walk, so that the thorns and pebbles will not prick his tender feet. And then it seems at the end of his life, he asked his wife and children, "Take me to the Tulsi grove, the Tulsi plants outside the garden." And he said, the master has promised he'll come. And then he said, at last, "Oh, master, so you have come. You kept up your promise. You have come." Saying so, master, what a beautiful death. And that Rasik's property, all have passed away. The small plot that was there in the Calcutta municipality, it gave to Sarada Mutt. Now we have a wonderful educational work going on there. We have 3-storied building we have built, and wonderful work. Dakshineshwar young girls are getting a lot of opportunity and education. They have become self-sufficient by these activities of Sarada Mutt. That's a big thing. There are 6 blessings. And his attitude, Sri Ramakrishna's attitude towards all these people was not just the compassion like how Buddha or Christ had. It's not just that way. It was based on a lofty vision of God. He looked upon them as God himself, and he did his redemptive work as a form of worship. That's the uniqueness of Sri Ramakrishna. And one story I'll end up by telling. There was a lady devotee, Yogin Ma, who was a companion of Holy Mother. Yogin Ma used to visit Sri Ramakrishna. They all belonged to high-class Brahmin family. So, the family people didn't like. Her brother, Harilal, didn't like his sister going to Sri Ramakrishna. So one day, he came to know that Sri Ramakrishna will be visiting for the first time to Yogin Ma's house. So what he did was, there was a ruffian by name Manmatha, and he was a wrestler too. Actually, he was a Brahmin, he was born Brahmin, but somehow he had taken to wrestling, and he had become a ruffian. And people were so afraid of him. So what this Harilal did was, when Sri Ramakrishna comes, he asked Manmatha to be there and teach him a lesson. And Manmatha was standing there, and Sri Ramakrishna's carriage came, and Sri Ramakrishna got down. He just glanced at Manmatha. That was the end of the man's. And he fell straight at the feet of the master, holding and asking him pardon. He said, "Pardon me, master." And Sri Ramakrishna, okay, he just went away. And that brought such a great change in the man, transformation, that he stopped all his wrestling and all this gundamis, what he was doing. He left all those things and he became the devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. And Swami Akhandananda, Gangadhar at the time, young man, with him, he came to Dakshineshwar, and Sri Ramakrishna took this Manmatha to Kali temple inside the Garbha Mandir, into the temple inside, and he initiated him in front of Mother Kali. What a unique blessing. Huh? And it's said that after passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, this Manmatha spent his whole life in joy and in ecstasy. He was completely dedicated to the spiritual practice. As that Sri Ramakrishna is in our heart. Our Guru has placed him in our heart. How much more are we blessed? Only we need to turn towards him. He is calling, the clarion call which he called. "Oh, where are you, my children? Come." That call hasn't gone waste. It is still coming. People are coming. Devotees are coming. And his grace is always on us. Only we need to just look at him, turn ourselves and look. May he shower his blessings on all of us. This is my honest prayer. Thank you.
So thanks again, everybody, for coming out in pretty good numbers considering the weather and COVID. And thanks to those who joined us via Zoom. So a few announcements. We have the weekly yoga class this Thursday from 10 a.m. We have the fortnightly Gita discussion this Friday from 7:30 p.m. or from 7 to come for the silent meditation if you're coming in person. And next Sunday, we have the monthly Gospel of Shrama Krishna talk by Gayatri Pranaji. And again, as we've been announcing, we've got this wonderful book on Pravrajika Prana Mataji, who started this center. So it's 500 pages of reminiscences from devotees in Australia and India. We've got this available. Then it'll be difficult to talk about, but I think I should. On a personal note, I found Lord Yama got a death hovering around me on Tuesday, to put it in a poetic way. It was in the form of blood clotting, known as pulmonary embolism. So it's a pretty serious condition. So I'm bowing down Sri Ramakrishna Holy Mother for giving me the alertness to pursue some medical advice on some not too dramatic symptoms. So happily, I got into hospital and early enough. And of course, once I got there, I felt quite safe and secure and well looked after. And it's such a strange thing that a few days later, here I am back out and they're telling me, back on with your life. So as dangerous as it is, it's with a good old blood thinning medication, it's very easily dealt with. And just some reflections. It was a bit, I might say, bemusing in the hospital ward. I was in a ward with 2 other people. And while we were dealing with our various medical conditions, up on our screens, on the TVs, there was flood emergency, there was war, and you just couldn't feel sorry for yourself watching that and reflecting on that. And I've got to say, thanks to the Concord Hospital, I tell you, amazing what a cheery, lively, efficient atmosphere there is around you, and that helps. And then I've got to say, good old Facebook was working pretty well for me in this situation. I did put up a note on there, and I got so many messages of support from here locally and internationally, and that's a time when Facebook does work very well, I find. So anyway, the story's not over. They've got to have some checks, the next few weeks. But anyway, prayers bowing down at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, because that was a close call. Finally, we've got donation plate there, donation box up the back, and food packets. Okay. So there's some food packets out in the driveway there for you to take some lunch on the way out.